In this episode, I have an interview with Lawrence Whittaker about the new Lyonesse game, some exciting news about a future release, and all the usual segments relating to everything Mythras. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 9, Hideous Trolls and Fairy Magic. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I'm your host, Inwils, and I hope you all had a really great holiday season and, well, Happy New Year to you all. I hope that this year brings you lots of joy and happiness. Now, if you're wondering what will be coming out in 2020 from the design mechanism, then do go back and have a listen to Lawrence's segment in episode 8. But as a further teaser, at the end of this episode, there is some new exciting news that I know we have all been looking forward to for some time. I'll just say it's some news about a new book in the Mythic Insert a Setting Here series. Can you guess? Wait, no fast forwarding, you might miss all the good bits. Okay, indulge me for a while, because before we get on to the interview and the exciting news, here are some campaign updates. We have managed to finish another series of adventures this month. After the party had a run-in with some assassins hired by the leader of the Thieves Guild in their hometown of Lindo, they decided that they wanted to pay the guild leader, Sniffer, a personal visit. With some help of some NPCs, they decided that killing him would probably not be the best course of action. Maybe Sniffer was better the devil you know when it comes to who is in charge of the Thieves Guild. Together, the party and the NPCs came up with a plan to hit Sniffer where it would hurt him the most. That's right, in his business dealings. The plan was to intercept a cargo of illegal goods and start to cast some doubt on Sniffer's ability to run the guild. I must say that things didn't go quite as planned. If you want to hear more about this, then you can catch up with my adventure reflection videos on my YouTube channel. The link to this is in the show notes below. Even though it didn't go as I planned, it did provide some great role-playing scenes. Notably, Bartleby's interaction with some street ruffians which the party hired to get the attention of some sailors. This was a GM's dream scene, although I must say it was totally created on the fly. You can probably see the look of pure horror on my face on the video. Also, the interaction between Hengist and Bartleby when they are trying to convince Sniffer's associates was a classic. Let's just say that what Hengist possesses in his combat skills is not mirrored in his social skills. The party took the cargo on a sewer barge. Yes, I bet you didn't know those existed. And after encountering some sewer wildlife and certain floating objects in the murky sewer water, the party met the rich merchant who was dealing with Sniffer. The combat was swift, but did include a double fumble during the combat, and Gulliver, whose willpower is epic, actually being befuddled. It was interesting to say the least, and if you want to see what happened, then you can find the full video on my YouTube channel, where you can find actual play videos, selected highlights, rule videos, and my own adventure reflections. Oh, And if you're interested in reading my adventure notes, then they are available on my website at inwils.co.uk. They are free, but feel free to donate something to my Content Creator Dream Fund if you can. Before I have a chat with Lawrence about the new Lyonesse game, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast would not happen without everyone's contributions. And if you would like to contribute to the podcast, then just drop me an email or message and let me know what you would like to cover. You can email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the various forums I frequent. Okay, so some of you will have seen the preview PDF of Lyonesse being shared on the various forums. Well, after giving it a read, I couldn't resist calling up Lawrence and getting some behind-the-scenes information about this new game. Hello, Lawrence, and welcome back to the Mythras Matters podcast. The Lyonesse PDF review or preview has caused a lot of excitement. Am I right in thinking it's based on, is it Jack Vance's series of novels? Was that the inspiration? Why Jack Vance's novels? That's what I was interested in.
Jack Vance had he is one of the reasons that the whole role-playing hobby exists at all. First of all, that's something that a lot of people probably don't realise. Gary Gygax was a huge Jack Vance fan, loved the Dying Earth novels. That's the most famous fantasy series that Jack Vance has produced. It's called The Dying Earth. It's a series of fantasy novels set as the sun is about to go out. Everybody is decadent. It's many, many aeons into the future. Very well worth reading. They're fantastic stories. And Gygax was a huge fan of these books. And the magic system in the very first Dungeons and Dragons was based on the way that magic works in Dying Earth. Wizards can memorize a certain number of spells. When you cast a spell, it erases itself from your memory until you relearn it again, because a spell is a complex kind of formula. And it takes up memory, a bit like RAM on a computer. And that's where the whole Vancian magic terminology comes from for D&D. So I'm a huge fan of the Dying Earth books, and the Lyonesse trilogy he wrote in the 1980s. And it's kind of his last big fantasy trilogy. And they're just fantastic novels. And I reread them. Actually, I listened to the audiobooks a couple of years ago when I was driving into work every day. I'd got a long commute to listen to the stories. And I just thought, I've got to see if someone has the license for this. I tracked down John Vance, Jack Vance's son, emailed him, said, what's the situation? And he said, yeah, it's available. We had some conversations about it, and we got it. So that was how it all went.
I was looking at, because I think you've put out the preview, haven't you? Because I was looking on some of the forums, and people are really excited about two things came across from their excitement. The first one was that this Lyonesse was happening, and there seems to be a huge amount of people really looking forward to it. And from what you were saying, I didn't realize it was all connected to the original, Dungeons and Dragons wizards and things like that. But the other thing everybody is talking about is the magic. Everybody's really excited about the magic system. So tell us a bit about the magic system.
Okay, so the magic system is nothing like Dungeons and Dragons. It's nothing like I've just been explaining, in a way. The Lyonesse books use there are two types of magic that crop up in Lyonesse, in the Lyonesse stories. The first is fairy magic, which are simple kind of spells that fairies would commonly cast. Tend to be quite utilitarian, a little bit like folk magic in Mythras, but a bit more esoteric, a bit more complex, a bit more mischievous in many ways. And that's quite simple stuff. It's quite simple to understand. And there's a wonderful sequence in the third of the Lyonesse stories called Maduke, where one of the magician characters is explaining how magic works to the title character, Madook, who's a fairy herself. He explains that this is very simple stuff, but really the more complex magic is Sandestin magic. And Sandestin magic is really what the Vancian magic system is from Dungeons and Dragons. So Sandestins are innately magical creatures, and really wizards that cast Sandestin magic, they don't really cast spells themselves. A spell is instructions that you give to a Sandestin, and they go off and do the magic for you. The overall effect is it looks like the wizard has gone blah, 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 waves his fingers, and something magical happens. But it's really a magical creature that's done it on your behalf. So it's kind of like summoning a magical entity with certain properties, and the shorthand is called a spell. That is really what it's about. So fairy magic, quite simple and straightforward. Sandestin magic, very powerful, very complex. Limitations on how much you can hold in your mind because it's so arcane, and you're summoning these weird little creatures that go and do it for you.
Yeah, and when I was reading the book, the fairy magic, the spells are absolutely fantastic. The titles of them are wonderfully, they're such a narrative. And I was looking at Zoophonic Whimsy Whistle. I didn't think so. Are they all from the books then? I haven't read The Dying Earth, so
there's only a handful of fairy magic spells described in the books, but they all have titles like that. So there are two that are precisely described. One is called Imp Spring Tinkletoe, which is in the game, and that's a spell that makes someone involuntarily leap up into the air, twiddling their feet in a state of confusion. The second one is called the Sisselway Chatterfang, and that causes your teeth to chatter incessantly at varying degrees of irritation, depending on how powerful the spell is. And so what we did for the game is work out what effects we wanted and then give it a name to fit, inspired by what we were seeing in the books. So all the names of the spells reflect what Jack Vance has.
Well, and I must say, you can't tell. I thought they were all from the books because they all seem to have that similarity with them. But that's really come across well.
So this is the genius of Pete Nash. Pete created the magic system, and what he did was go through every book in the Lyonesse series. There are 3 novels in the sequence. He noted down every single magical effect, worked out whether it was fairy magic or satin magic, looked at how the effect was working, saw how he could replicate that in game terms, came up with a name for it. And that probably gave him about half the fairy spells that are in there. There's 100 fairy spells and 100 Sandestin spells. And they can be combined in different ways. So it's an infinite kind of combination. Where we had to fill in the gaps, it was easy enough to sort of say, well, this spell does this kind of thing. Therefore, there must be an equivalent spell that does such and such. So it was quite easy once we'd been through and worked out what magic was demonstrated in the books to work out what other spells would likely exist as well. And some of them are adaptations of core Mythras spells, things that we've included in the folk magic. We sort of tailored it to Lyonesse, but it's very much their own thing, very much their own flow.
When I was reading the new, well, it's a setting, I presume. It's rather than a new set of rules, or do you class it as a new set of rules?
It's a full game. It's a full game in its own right. So we have we have all the rules in there. You don't need Mythras to play this. Based on Mythras, but we've adapted the rules to fit the setting quite precisely. So there are brand new cultures for the characters to come from. They're tailored directly to the Elder Isles, which is where the Lyonesse stories are set. The combat rules, more or less the same. We've kind of slimmed a couple of things down, made a couple of little corrections here and there, but broadly they're the same. There are some new skills in there. There's a new way of handling money. And there's a lot of background about the setting itself. But we wanted to actually produce a standalone game because a lot of people that will be interested in Jax's work may not necessarily have heard of Mythras, and to ask them to go out and buy the core book as well as one of our setting supplements, we thought we'd take a different tack.
Yeah. And that definitely came across when I was reading it. It's like a complete game in itself. And I noticed it had a feel of Mythras through it, but there was new skills, all this wonderful spells, and new cultures and everything, which I thought was a real nice touch. So is it a case that we're hoping, or you're hoping, that people who are fans of Jack Vance's work are going to come on board and buy this? Is that the sort of like the target audience?
Absolutely, yeah. Anybody that's a Jack Vance fan, and if you're not, you should be. We hope they're going to pick up the game. Whether you're a fan of the Dying Earth novels, because you can effectively lift the Sandestin magic from that and use it in the Dying Earth game. Whether you're a fan of Lyonesse itself. And the Lyonesse stories are wonderful. They're a mixture of high folklore, European sort of fairy traditional fantasy, and Game of Thrones in terms of the politicking, the scheming, and the brutality that goes on. They're quite brutal books in some places. So yes, we very much hope that this is going to appeal to the Jack Vance fan. But equally, we hope that people that enjoy all our other games that may not have experienced Lyonesse, maybe they've only heard of it in passing, maybe they've never heard of it at all. We hope they're going to pick it up and be encouraged to go out and read the books as well. We give a complete overview of what happens in the story. There's a lot of background information in there. You don't need to have read the novels to get the most out of this, but it will certainly help if you have. And if you want to replay the stories or you want to do your own thing with it, then all the advice is given in there for you to do it. So we're hoping to hit a broad audience, but definitely the Jack Vance fan, and certainly fans of the Lyonesse trilogy, because they're a great place to adventure.
I really I think I'm right in thinking that there's an overview of the trilogy in the actual rule set, isn't there? And it sort of like gives an overview of what's happened.
Absolutely. Dave Morris, who's a stalwart of the British role-playing game scene, he created Dragon Warriors back in the 1980s, which was an incredibly well-received British role-playing game. Massive Jack Vance fan. He has written the overview of each of the books. So in a few pages, you understand exactly what the story is, who the principal characters are, what they're hoping to achieve. And it's a wonderful little potted way for you to just read that and understand and get what the Lyonesse game is going to offer you. And then the rest of the book develops, deepens, and enriches that understanding.
I was wondering because there might be Jack Vance, hopefully people who really like the books listening to this. Is the actual game set in a specific time period within the Jack Vance trilogies? Is it before or after the Dying Earth? Or can it just be placed anywhere?
Well, the Dying Earth is set at the very end of the world's existence. There's no real connection between Lyonesse and the Dying Earth, except that a similar kind of magic is used. Now, whether that was intentional on Jack Vance's part or not, I'm really not sure. So really, they're completely separate milieus. And there is a Dying Earth game. There was a Dying Earth game produced by Pelgrane Press a few years ago. There's a new edition coming out from Goodman Games, powered by Dungeon Crawl Classics. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with that. But Lyonesse is actually set around a similar kind of time to Mythic Britain. It's set probably the early 5th century, nominally. And Lyonesse itself is the subject of many legends in Celtic folklore, a group of islands that existed between Britain and France that sunk under the ocean and was lost forever. Lots and lots of local legends about that. So it draws on that very rich folklore tradition, all these Celtic stories, which is where the fairies come in and so forth. So it's a very self-contained background. It's deliberately anachronistic. This isn't like Mythic Britain, where we have very, very grim, dirty Saxons. This is very much like the Arthurian tradition. You have knights in gleaming armour, on horseback. It's a very kind of high medieval setting, but set at a very early period in history. It's very much like T.H. White's The Once and Future King in that respect, or the traditional Mordath or Pendragon. It sort of draws on that rich theme of folklore. So it's really nothing like Mythic Britain, although it takes place at the same kind of time.
Well, one of the things that I really liked, I love the almost like the tavern and the village generators that you can sort of like within it. It sort of like says, where did that come from? Because I really like that. Was that something that was...
Ian, you really need to go and read some Jack Vance. Immediately promise me after this interview, you're going to go and find all Jack Vance's books and you're going to read them all. Jack Vance's stories are characterized usually by people trekking from one place to another. And if you're trekking from one place to another, whether it's in The Dying Earth, whether it's in Lyonesse, whether it's in his Planet of Adventure series, they stop and eat. And they stop and they eat at taverns and hotels and places like that. There is always a landlord that's out to do something, whether it's to try and extricate as much money from the clientele as possible, or serve substandard food and claim it's haute cuisine. There's this huge reference to food, drink, staying, hospitality. And so we wanted to recreate that. And so we've got these wonderful random tables for creating a village where there's something going on. And that you find out all the way through the Lyonesse stories. Village after village, small town, small neighbourhood, small community, always something weird going on. The tavern with a strange name and a secret. A landlord or an innkeeper that may have something that they're doing that maybe isn't quite right. And Mark Shirley created the rules for those, put together a series of tables that are just wonderful. When we were playtesting this, we sat down and created an entire scenario just from using those random tables. We created a town, a village to go with it, a weird landlord, and that created the adventure, and we played with those elements. And then I developed the Vancian meal generator, because another characteristic of Jack Vance's stories are he lovingly describes these incredible dishes, quail's egg in a tart sauce with candied eel bladder as a side. He really does love his food, and this sort of strange gourmandism that goes along with his work. And so we wanted to make sure that you got that in there. So the Vancian meal generator is a really nice touch. It's a great way of communicating the atmosphere of his books.
When I was reading it, I suddenly sort of like felt, because one thing I sometimes worry about as a GM is that I could have players who are very familiar with a setting, who might be even more familiar than myself. But I just love that aspect of it, is that these tables will generate a feel of taverns and people and villages, which was really reassuring, as a GM. What about races? Because we talk about fairy magic, and are they the Fae, or how does that work?
They are the Fae, and you can play fairies in the game. Ostensibly, the races are all human, but if you want to play a halfling, as the non-human races are called, Vance calls them halflings, you can, and they come in a number of different flavours. You have the gross halflings, which are typically trolls and ogres, quite ugly. And these are your traditional child-eating monsters that have got weird places deep in the forests. Horrible, horrible people, completely base and corrupt. You then have the Twixts. And the Twixts are kind of the goblins of the saga. And then you have the core fairies. And the fairies are sort of very mischievous. They can be quite malevolent. They like to negotiate and bargain and extract favors from people. And so we've got rules for creating a fairy character, how to play that fairy, and then of course the non-human races form the bad guys and the other protagonists in the game world itself. So there's a lot of information around those non-human species.
Are there 4 different cultures? Tell me about those.
Yeah, there are. So the main culture is called Hideous. The Elder Isles is an archipelago. It's a series of islands sort of clustered together in the Cantabrian Gulf. Between France and Britain. Hideous is the biggest of those islands. It's where the vast bulk of the action in the Lyonesse stories takes place. So the main culture is Hideous, and that actually relates to most of the settled areas in all the islands. So that's the culture most people are going to come from. Another culture is Skagen. Some of the bad guys are villainous Scandinavian invaders called the Scar, and they've colonized one of the islands off the north coast of Hideous. They've got a very peculiar culture all of their own. They're almost kind of like almost sort of proto-Nazis in a way. They're very disdainful, very xenophobic, very disdainful of anybody that isn't Scar, very militaristic, highly civilized, but quite brutal in their methods. They think nothing of enslaving other people. They will indenture them for a minimum of 30 years. You may earn your freedom. So we have the Scar culture as well. You can play a Scar in the game. We have a culture called itinerant. A big swathe of the main island, Hideous, is given over to the Forest of Tantraval, which is kind of even though it spans a number of different countries, it's almost its own realm where people do live and work. So we have the itinerant culture, which reflects these small pockets of communities that don't belong to the main Hideous culture. The Celtic culture is very much based around Druidism, and it's a fantasy Druidism. That's kind of confined to the northern edge of Hideous. They believe in the old Celtic gods, very much a spirit tradition, very warlike in their ways, lots of cattle raids, lots of drinking, lots of feasting, and they're kind of looked down on by the Hideous as being a bit uncouth, a bit unmanageable. So they're the fourth culture.
And I think when I was reading about them, they all seem to be fit nicely together, if that makes sense. You could really see their sort of like their personalities within those cultures coming out. I love the role-playing aspect of games, and I really did think there was plenty for me to get my teeth into, so to speak, with the different cultures.
More than just the cultures, that will kind of give you the base, but the kingdoms for the different cultures all have their own flavour. They all have their own tradition. So even playing someone of the Hideous culture, there's going to be a great difference in personality for someone from Lyonesse, the kingdom of Lyonesse, to a Hideous culture coming from Trosinet, which is one of the other big civilized islands, one of the other major political players in the game. They've got very different feels, very different ambitions, very different ways of going about things. So you're going to get a lot of variety, and it is a very character-driven game. The books are character-driven. They've got these wonderful characters, wonderful strange motivations. And again, that's another hallmark of Jack Vance's writing, very well-drawn, scheming characters that are looking to get one over on everybody else some of the time.
Does it go with the module, Codifoot Stipule as well?
That's exactly what it goes with, yeah.
So what came first? That's what I'm really interested in. Did the module come before the Lyonesse?
Lyonesse comes first, officially, but we released the module early because Chris Hart, that runs the Grognardia podcast, he's a big Lyonesse fan, knew that we were doing the game, and he said, well, I'd like to run a scenario for you at UK Games Expo. So I said, that's fantastic. You need to write a scenario. So I put something together. based on one of the playtest sessions that we've had for Lyonesse. And I thought, I can't just send it as a Word file. I'll put it into the layout. So, and it'll be a good test to see how the layout works. So I laid it out. I've got some artwork, put some artwork in it. And then I thought, actually, no, this is good enough to publish. And by publishing it, we actually met our contractual obligations with the license owners early. So we had to have a product printed by February of 2020. So by having it earlier than that, we actually met our legal obligation. But also it's a good way of building some of the interest around the game itself. So yeah, it wasn't planned that way at all. We just planned to launch the game and then have some modules on the back. It just came out topsy-turvy.
So when we've seen the preview, when will this actually be published? When is it going to be available for the public?
I'm hoping that we'll have it available for March 2020. We're finishing layout now. It's very well advanced. I think I'm about 90% of the way done with all of that. Then we'll need to proof it. It needs to be approved by John Vance, and then it can go on sale. So I think we're looking at about 2 or 3 months, probably closer to 3 months, I would think, before it's available. But it is coming. It's definitely happening. We're on target for the schedule that we set for ourselves. So I'm looking forward to it.
Fantastic. And obviously, people who are into the Jack Vance books will be keen when this comes out. But what would you recommend for other people, who are not familiar with the books? Do you think it's something for them to get their teeth into?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, the Lyonesse stories are just wonderful fantasies. They've got all the ingredients of a good fantasy story. You've got really villainous villains. You've got powerful magicians with obscure motivations of their own. It's like The Princess Bride. If you like The Princess Bride, Lyonesse is very much in that vein. You have true love. You've got tragedy. You've got people searching for their fathers searching for their sons, exiled princesses that need rescuing, villainous kings that will stop at nothing to get what they want and thwart everybody in the process. You've got clashes of armies. You've got individual rogues, you've got dimension hopping, several parts of the books take place in other worlds. It's got everything in there, it really has. And if you love The Princess Bride, you should really, really like Lyonesse. It is that kind of vibe. If you like Game of Thrones, there's all the politicking, scheming and backstabbing that you get in that series. If you like the whimsicality of fairy tales, you have that too. So there's something for everybody in these games. And it's very different to the way that Mythras plays. Mythras is designed very much as a toolkit. This is designed to reflect the world. So I think that you're in for a different experience.
Fantastic. And just to Codifoot Stipule, that's available now, isn't it? If people want to get a taster, they can actually...
That's been available since August, September time, I think. It's a self-contained adventure. You don't need Lyonesse rules to use it. You can use Mythras Imperative or Mythras if you want. There are pre-written characters in there, pre-generated characters. Nice little self-contained adventure. It's got all the flavour of a Lyonesse story in there. We've included some of the rules, like the meal generator, and I think the tavern rules are in there as well. But you can enjoy it for what it is. It's a very good little primer for the sort of stories to expect.
And I must admit,
But the full game goes into
a lot more detail. Yeah, because I got the taste of Lyonesse from that module because I bought it and read it, and I thought, I can see where this. And just to reassure you, once I started to read the preview, I have actually bought the Jack Vance books from Audible, so they're all lined up, ready for me to start listening.
Excellent.
So I was just thinking, if it's
what have you bought?
Well, I think I bought what you suggested in the rules.
Okay.
I think you suggested that trilogy or something, and I thought I would start there.
Yeah. There's Yeah, three books in the trilogy. Soldier's Garden. This is the obligatory plug for the author's work. Soldier's Garden is the first. That's what sets everything up. The Green Pearl begins to really develop some of the machinations that are going on. And then finally, the Duke is the conclusion, and a very satisfying conclusion to a big, epic, sprawling trilogy as well. So, yeah, those three books, that's the complete Lyonesse saga, and it's a wonderful experience, whether it's audiobook or reading them in the physical format.
And I think with it going live in March, that gives everybody the opportunity to read those books or reread those books, ready for the game to come live, and then get straight into it. Are you going to GM it?
Oh, I've been GMing it. So since we decided we were going to do the game, I've been playtesting it, and I've been running Dying Earth games for a number of years, either using Pelgrane's original Dying Earth system or just using something made up. So that's been a feat of little commissions that I've run over the years. Games set in Dying Earth. I've run a number of mini campaigns based in Lyonesse. So, I will definitely be GMing this. And I think that what you should do, Ian, is invite me to come and GM a Lyonesse game for you and your players on your stream. I would love that for you.
That'd be fantastic.
And you get a chance to play. You can sit back. Well, let's make that a date then for next year. I will come and GM something for you, and then the viewing public can see just how bad a GM I really am.
That would be
we'll have a lot of fun.
I'm sure everybody would love that. Well, thank you very much. It's been wonderful talking to you again.
Oh, my pleasure, Ian, always.
And as ever, whoever I interview on this for this podcast, I always go away totally inspired and motivated to, go out and do something. So keep up the good work. That's what I would say. Because, in general, because you're doing a great job.
It's great to have the opportunity to come and talk about something I'm really excited about, something that's, it's our love letter to Jack Vance. It's been an absolute pleasure and honour to produce this game. We've worked with the very best writers we could get for this. They've done a fantastic job, and I hope that everybody enjoys the game just as much as we have in putting it together. And very grateful to you.
Thanks again, Lawrence, for popping into the podcast to give us that inside information about the forthcoming Lyonesse game. Now, before we come to an end, I would just like to say a little bit of a plug for the wonderful Discord channel. If you want to read more about rules and have questions answered by experts, like myself, then do go over to the Discord channel run by two fantastic contributors to the Mythras rule set. They have a huge amount of knowledge between them, and they have a thriving community over there. The link is in the show notes, so do pop over and have a chat with them. They're absolutely fantastic. And as always, don't forget that you can have your say on the podcast. Is there something that we've said that you like, something you agree with, something that you disagree with? Then why not record it and send it to us here at Mythras Matters? You can record it via free audio software called Audacity, and email it to me as either a WAV or an MP3 file to inwils@gmail.com. It would be great to hear from some of you, and it would mean that you didn't have to listen to my dulcet tones all the time. And it also means that we can have a new segment called Have Your Say. Just use the following format for your audio file: your name and location, and then your comments, questions or responses. Save it and email it to me, and you could be featuring in next month's segment of Have Your Say. Okay, that's it. Oh, wait, I forgot. There's some exciting news. Back to Lawrence.
The first is Pete he's working on a mini Luther Arkwright campaign, which is based on a series of scenarios that he ran for me and my friends over a 2 or 3 year period. So he's almost finished writing those up. We will be releasing it as a mini Luther Arkwright campaign. We've renewed the license for Luther Arkwright with Brian Talbot. That will continue for the foreseeable future. Brian is working on a brand new series of Luther Arkwright adventures. They're due out in a couple of years' time, so that's fantastic news. But Pete also told me that he's in Mythic Greece, finished in its first draft in March, and I will be going out to Sweden, and we will no doubt be playtesting it. So Mythic Greece is actually almost finished. It won't be out next year. Probably take us a year to get it done, but we've got a lot of great Mythic books that are coming out. So, but Mythic Greece is definitely on the way. Finally kind of got there.
And that's it. Another episode of Mythras Matters completed. I hope you are inspired to read or reread Jack Vance's books in preparation for the publication of Lyonesse, and that you are looking forward to the other items as much as I am. I personally can't wait to run a Luther Arkwright campaign. So, until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat again to you all in February. Until then, I hope that all your posed roles succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you.